In today's session, we're fortunate that we have two entrepreneurs, one of whom, and I'll leave you to think through who that is, has given birth to three unicorns. And as you can probably imagine, giving birth to a unicorn is a very painful, hard process. And so they were just pointing out to me that the three of us have the colors of the Indian flag, if I stood right in the middle of them. But what we're going to do today, since we have the two of them as the primary source of knowledge over here, is I'll ask a few questions and we'll get started. And then after that, use most of the session in a Q&A, have questions from you that they will answer. But before starting, I thought it's useful to set a little bit of context. And there are 4 questions that I'd like you to think about in terms of the development of the entrepreneurship ecosystem in India. And in front of you, there is ABCD controls. And if you could pick one of them and say, what do you think is the most important constraint to development of entrepreneurship? This will help them think through, but will also give us a sense of what you think as a group. So just click on A, B, C, or D on the panel in front of you. And we can see what you've answered. And we'll keep that up, so as you're asking questions or having opinions, we can get back to you and say what it is.
Maybe we'll change their minds.
Yeah.
I know.
10 more seconds and then we'll...
All right, interesting. Wow, didn't expect that.
So it's really interesting because D is the legal and regulatory environment. And we were thinking that when we came in that the order would be almost exactly reversed. And we were thinking that the insight that they would provide is that that's actually a big constraint.
So our work here is done?
Yeah, exactly. I think one other thing that I'd like to do in terms of setting the context, and this is US data, not Indian data, is a sense of what is it that entrepreneurs actually do. So that's these are some charts based on approximately 12,000 companies in the US over the last 15 years. And what it shows you is the return, the exit value return on companies. So the number on the top, the 74.74, 75% or so, is the number of companies that have returned zero, all the way down. And then the chart on the right is where do the VCs get their returns from, the percentage of companies. And so what you'll see is that getting into entrepreneurship, you can expect that you're likely to fail, that the predominant mode of being is failing. And a lot of what an entrepreneur does is find ways to constantly reduce the uncertainty, reduce the risk, and find ways to fail better in the process. And in that process, what you do is you end up creating value, creating changes in society, changes in almost everything we do. So if you go back and you look at every part of what you do on a daily basis, in 80 or 90% of the cases, you can name an entrepreneur who took a chance at some point and made that actually happen. One of the things we're doing here at HBS is there's a big healthcare initiative. We think healthcare is one of the big challenges across the whole global economy. And they just recently come out with a set of findings that haven't yet been published. And so one of the things they did was they took the best Western hospital they could find in terms of efficiency. And this is for heart processes. And they look at a series of different kinds of procedures that are done for heart conditions. And the first one they looked at was a heart hospital that has very high quality, but applies the Toyota production system methodologies. So they try and apply an industrial approach to saying, how do we deal with healthcare? The second one was one that said that what we want to do is treat the patient as a whole, and provide really high levels of care, because the quality of care that we provide will actually determine the outcomes and will reduce the cost in the long term. And so we looked at that. And the third one was an Indian hospital that provides at scale heart operations. And so the first one the first one that I mentioned, the Toyota process, was at, say, 100 in terms of cost. All three of them had similar outcomes. And so the second one was at 140 or so. So it's the high care one. What would you guess the Indian hospital had on that basis? If the efficient operation here was at 100, what would you guess?
75.
So we got one at 75.
40.
45.
45.
95.
95. So did someone say 10? 10?
20.
20. It was actually 10. So I think the point of just bringing that example in, is to think really hard at some of the most intractable problems that we broadly face. Different approaches come in, and you can have radically different outcomes as a result of it. And so there are things that we learn from what happens in Silicon Valley, the things we learn from what happens in Israel, and there's a lot that we can learn from what happens in India. But also, each of the things that we do has to be fit into the environment that we want to go to. So what I'd ask each of our panelists to do is to start with a quick background on their story, so that you have a context. And then from that, I'll ask a couple of questions, then we'll move into Q&A. We'll start with that.
So I'm the guy who's not on the app and the original panel. I'm Kunal Shah. I'm part of the second panel, but I just came into this panel because I thought entrepreneurship is a more interesting topic than just talking about technology. Run a company called as Free Charge. Started in August 2010. Sold the company April last year for $450 million. Probably one of the probably original ideas from India that actually in the consumer internet space. India is known to have only copycat business models. Before that, used to run an outsourcing company and actually a philosophy graduate and a MBA dropout, not an engineering background. What's interesting about the journey for me has been that it's almost easy to do a business in India as long as you're not doing something that is kind of obvious and known and copycat of a Western or Eastern model. There are huge gaps in the Indian market and not being addressed. If someone like me can pull off a $500,000 exit, there are some really smart people in this room should be in India and solving those things versus kind of being there. So that's my objective of being here. And obviously we'll answer more questions through the team.
Okay. So I've been in India for the last 11 years or so. I moved back originally to work with a fund called Sherpalo, and we were working together with Kleiner Perkins. And this was in 2005. And when we moved in 2005, the idea was we were going to invest in a bunch of consumer tech companies. And people had tried it in 2000. And I mean, I think the data does a great job of showing that you've got to be a little crazy to kind of get into this whole game. And I think in 2005, the thought process again was, all right, well, now things are going to happen and it's a good time to go. So we went back and we actually didn't set up a fund and didn't set up any structure. We simply said, let's see what happens. So I moved in June of 2005. In September, we invested in an online travel business called ClearTrip. We then continued to grow that for a while. I took on the role of CEO. I ran it for 2 years, learned a lot about the process of building a business, growing a business, raising a lot of money, burning a lot of money, hiring a lot of people, firing a lot of people, all sorts of things. And so we went through that. Ultimately, we exited and sold our position in the business. I'm still on the board, work closely with the team. In parallel, we continued to invest in other companies. So we invested in a company called InfoEdge in the classified listing space, a business called InMobi, which is in the mobile advertising space. And in 2013, we left Sherpalo and Kleiner and set up another fund called Lightbox. And for this, we actually, in the process, bought out some of the investments I'd made earlier and raised a fresh $100 million with the idea that we're going to continue to invest in very early stage businesses. So we go in early, we take a very deep operating role with companies, and we work with the teams to build and grow them. I think Kunal made a great point in that I think India is generally very unique. And I think the uniqueness of India is often lost as you go with the hype of saying, I'm going to build and become one of the outliers on that graph. And so I think that if you can understand the uniqueness of India and appreciate that, look, quite honestly, our biggest asset is we have 1 billion people at a low ARPU. And I think Kunal figured that out extremely well in their business. And we were unfortunate not to have participated in that, but hopefully the next one. But we that's our fundamental. And the other reality of it is we have a country that has inefficiency at tremendous scale. So we've managed to do that extremely well also. So, we've got these two things that kind of have to underlie your thought process on the types of businesses you think about. And the unfortunate reality is most of the growth capital that has come into the market has searched for, are you the Airbnb of India? Are you the Instacart of India? Are you the X of India? And so, unfortunately, the X of India may not necessarily make the most sense and may not necessarily be the business model that's the most applicable. So we spend a lot of time thinking and worrying about that and have invested in businesses that we hope are addressing this unique aspect of it, but it makes it challenging to communicate the proposition to other people as they look at it with a very different lens. But I'm happy to go into more of that as we talk.
So I think if we just start right from the beginning on teams, there's speculation on both sides. On the one hand, that the Indian environment creates an environment in which, because you're constantly navigating which rules you should follow, which rules you shouldn't follow, all kinds of blockages in the system, and it creates a class of entrepreneurs who can solve problems with very little resource. That's one stream of thinking. The other stream of thinking is that that the Indian environment does not create entrepreneurs in the sense that Silicon Valley does. That there's a shortage of talent, there's a shortage of people who know how to scale enterprises and so on. Which one do you think is more accurate, or what's the nuance on it?
I think it's funny, but the smartest people tend to become more risk averse in India, and that's because the system tells you that the only way to kind of become safe is kind of follow the perfect roadmap towards making career choices of that nature. The smartest talent is not currently in the market. I mean, I do angel invest in many companies, but I have not seen the quality of talent that is really required to build a great company yet that you will be totally impressed with. And I think the reason is I don't think we believe in going and observing what is truly there in the market and building. I think the education system, at least in India, what I've noticed is that you pretty much get locked out from the real world from the 10th grade till you kind of crack your IIT and then figure out how to get into Ivy League and so on and so forth. The real world is kind of, especially from India lens perspective, is kind of miss. And it's funny, I actually had a Facebook post when I asked questions to followers, and I asked them, can you list the inefficiencies that you see around in your own world? And I had 450 comments, and there was not a single startup solving any of those inefficiencies, right? And that's like, somebody just like came and said, this is great, we're gonna have some IIT teams called and told me this is great, like we're gonna pick up ideas from here and build some stuff. But we've been like really short on good ideas and good talent. Coming to the specific question on what is really, I think the whole thought of, means I saw the legal and regulatory environment is actually being talked about. I don't think that is true, right? You just need to start. I means even if you were probably wrong on something, I mean, you can easily fix it. There are no rules that you will violate to the point that you will be kind of totally become illegal. I think there is a huge perception that happens through media around what kind of news comes out. For example, what happens with, let's say, cab companies, with a small, let's say, a classic case of how Uber rape case kind of became like the biggest story, versus the ground reality is there are like probably 200,000 cab drivers who have started earning from 15,000 rupees to 80,000 rupees. That story has never come out in any media, right? So what we are not seeing is that as inefficiencies are being removed and values being created, there are some great companies that are coming about, but we just tend to have this notion, and I don't see enough people taking the risk. Whereas in my view, if you just operate on principles of creating original ideas, India is probably the easiest market because you will not have many people competing with you.
Yeah, I come back to this idea that we have inefficiency at scale that applies across the board and everything. And I think that so far, our approach has been that when you're going to invest or work with entrepreneurs, you're going to do it in spite of the government system and process, not in hope that it's going to do something. Now, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was quite pleasantly happy to see that we had this whole Startup India, Stand Up India movement, and irrespective of whether anything actually gets implemented or not, it sent a very clear message that the government at least cares about entrepreneurship, cares about promoting the idea, and they talked a lot about failure, interestingly. And I think that, one of the hardest things in India is actually failing, and from a variety of perspectives, whether it's from a societal perspective, but actually just take it from a practical perspective. To shut down a company can take 4 years. That's painful. Who wants to start a company to take 4 years to shut it down? You're shutting down a lot of companies. And so, I think that the frameworks are what they are. Now, you can either opt to say, okay, that's too complicated and I'm out. Or you say, all right, that's part of the game and that's part of the cards that are dealt, and now you go build your business. Because, again, as Kunal said, there's a ton of stuff that just doesn't work. And because of the years of fragmentation that exist, a small example, the largest apparel company has a 1% market share. The largest apparel company in the US has a 13% market share. This is because retail has been 94% fragmented. Because of this, we don't have brands in many verticals. So you can now build these things. You can now go after this stuff. When we've thought about the entrepreneurs and the people that have worked well for us, I think that they've all approached it from a perspective of it's not about, it's going to sound crude, but not about the money. It's actually about feeling that there's such a clear, great opportunity that is never going to come about again to do something significantly impactful, and that's what they're going after. And I think I saw that over the years with Naveen at InMobi, seen that with Sandeep at ShopClues, and now we're working with him on a new company, and Sanjeev at InfoEdge. These guys are in it for something much bigger than whatever that company stock is going to be worth on a given day. So I think all the regulatory stuff is real. It's irritating. It's solvable with a person who will manage it and administer it for you. And then the rest of your time you spend actually figuring out the problem.
So I work with a company that has an India operation where they hire medical professionals. So these are well-educated, well-paid people, and as we were talking to them, we were saying, what's the biggest challenge in getting really motivated, well-educated, capable people? And one of them said that if you want to understand what's valued in a society, what you have to do is read the matrimonial column.
That is true.
So, you say, what are the things that people are wanting and what are the things that people are advertising about themselves? And there are hardly any entrepreneurs saying, I failed twice at my entrepreneurial venture, I'm a really good catch. And so I think slowly things change in a society, and what you need for that is a set of role models. You need to have stories of people who've done amazing things. So 15 years ago in the US, you had that same thing where entrepreneurship was something that was done on the side. I used to work at BCG. I left and joined an entrepreneurial company, and my mother was completely appalled. She said, how can you possibly do that? I hoped you'd go from this company I don't know anything about to GE or somebody that we've heard about here. And so slowly society changes as you get the maturation. The feels to me like in India, in the last few years at least, there's been more of a acceptance of entrepreneurship in the ecosystem.
I actually have interesting observations around this topic. I think in India, I think a lot of the training that happens early in our life is through shaming, right? And I think we use shame as a big tool to train the young in India, and therefore shame becomes the biggest factor for our decisions later on in life as well, right? So we are always worried about what the other people will think about in Indian society a lot more than what we really want. And I think that's good from a society perspective. I think it keeps the society fairly sane to some extent, but I think it just stops individual development because we don't take risk. I have almost noticed is that one interesting thing is two examples. One, we had a small little office in Bangalore. We were already a funded company by Sequoia Capital, but we always never believed in having these glamorous offices. We had a small garage-like office even after that, and an engineer joined our company, and he was looking for an apartment. Landlord asked about the company free charge. Nobody knew about that. So he came to the office along with a guy to see our office, and absolutely shabby office. And he told the guy that, dude, you are a young guy, you should join Infosys or TCS and like have a good choice in your life. And he actually did not give the apartment to the guy. And it's amazing what happened. And another story I remember is that when we had our first TV commercial out, we did a large projector presentation to the entire team, 60, 70 of us. And we asked everybody, especially in the junior rank, that what did you think about the commercial? And nobody had a feedback, but they were all smiling. And I could not understand what's going on. I was like, give me some feedback, criticism, what is right, what is working for you. They were just happy and smiling. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, Kunal, finally we can tell our family, hum ye company mein kaam karte hain. And then I realized that this society in India is massively filled with trust deficit. Right? In India, we don't trust each other as much as we do in the Western countries. And in 1972, I think Dr. Arrow won a Nobel Prize for a thesis that he said that countries that have high trust deficit don't progress as much because every transaction that people are thinking twice. In India, when you get a bill in a restaurant, people check the total before they pay. It's not the thing I've observed in the West. When we give our car for servicing, we make sure the petrol is to zero, and then we give the car. There are hundreds of these things that you will observe.
You got some issues, huh?
No, it's true, and I think that's a function of a society that has a massive trust deficit, and therefore, we just tend to have these doubts about everything. But interesting thing is that if you crack trust, you can create brand extensions like crazy, right? Like Tata can pretty much launch anything and get away with it because we trust that brand, or a political party can have Gandhi and keep continuing the Gandhi legacy, or if you are a Bollywood guy, you can have the Kapoor legacy and continue because you crack one brand thing, and because we don't trust otherwise, we just tend to trust something a lot because we don't believe in generally trusting.
After that, what do you think? What's good about the environment?
I was actually quite intrigued by everything you were saying. I think you're absolutely right. We had lunch today and I didn't check the bill, and I felt very comfortable here. So, look, I do, I agree 100% that failure has been not promoted and not encouraged. And look, I've been doing it for 11 years now, and I'd say that overall, the people I meet today are much more comfortable walking into that shed and working in that startup. And years ago, when we started ClearTrip, we had a huge issue. I talked to our CTO at that time, said, why can't we hire people? He's like, have you seen our office? And so this was the problem. And now, irrespective of what we would pay or what the work looked like, it was challenging. So we actually had to get a better office for that primary objective. Now, that's not the case today. I think it's becoming a badge of honor. I think it is not yet necessarily widely celebrated as the idea that you failed, nor should that necessarily be the objective of the exercise to fail. So I think that's fine. I think the environment is going to go through some challenge in the next 18 months because there will be some massive failure. And that will be the next big test of the system. Recently, there's been a lot of conversation that the crazy VCs are the ones pumping up all the money into all these businesses and forcing the entrepreneurs to go nuts and go crazy and all of this stuff. I, I think it's a very simple thing to say that, but it is a very true sense that businesses are spending way beyond the means of the market, and so as a result, there will be some stuff that's not going to go well, and the question will be, will the sentiment be resilient towards this notion of go ahead and go crazy and the guy's got a TV commercial, maybe that's not going to be the best idea going forward, and maybe some of the things will recalibrate, and you'll start to say, look, I actually have these are the economics of my business. This is the pain I solve. This is our product proposition. People will understand it. I mean, their product proposition was amazing, whether they had a TV commercial or not. I think just conveying that to people, I think, was a bit challenging in a different world. So, look, I think we're moving in the right direction. I think venture in this country, in the U.S., has existed for, 50, 60 years, probably in that context. And we're probably really 15 years and so, but look, I think we catch up very fast, and we don't catch up in a very predictable manner. I mean, a great example for me of something that just took off that no one had actually expected at that time was, if you go back and look at Bharti Airtel's stock price. This company went public in 2000. They raised They raised $200 million at $1 billion valuation with 1 million subscribers. The stock stayed flat for the next 5 years, and literally missed the market overall missed every number for what people expected mobile penetration to be. 2004, it was supposed to be 50 million subscribers, it was 30 million. In 2005, it was supposed to be 100 million subscribers, we were 50 million. And people just said this stuff is not working. Now, understand, this is a country where teledensity was probably under 1%. I mean, they were measuring telephone density by phone booths. So that's how kind of off we were there in terms of thinking about this. And so, fundamentally made sense that people had a phone. Now, yet, it was just not getting value in any way. Now, what changed? Reliance came in. Very unpredictable thing for any model to put into an Excel spreadsheet and say, what day will Reliance launch? Quite honestly, I think, in fact, and so just to continue that story, Bharti's stock price went up 25x in a 5-year period. So it turned out very well. If you had an interesting product proposition at the right price, enabled by somebody else driving the price down, something similar is going to happen in penetration in terms of adoption. We're already the second largest internet market in the world. 80% of our traffic's on mobile. We double smartphones every year. We're at somewhere around 9 million apps in our app economy. So things are going well. It will get accelerated soon.
So let's open it up to questions. Anything you'd like, because this is a big room, if you could hit the mic button. There's a little white button next to the microphone, and use that so everyone gets the question. Go ahead.
Hi, Masai. And I had a question on how sort of not exactly on the first few. How is it? Is it still or are there other ways to?
Yep. So it's interesting that you're asking this question. The startup should be probably here and trying to get some of you guys over there. I think it makes sense to kind of enter into companies which are Series A, Series B kind of funded with, I would say, tier one investors, and kind of where you have some comfort in terms of runway / model. I personally recommend that you should kind of do a little bit of homework on the space and companies and founder before you kind of approach that. There are ways to attend some of these events where all of these guys show up usually, but I don't think we have a structured way of getting a lot of global talent to come, and that's something that I just came to me when you just asked me this question, that we really don't have any way to kind of bring a lot of people in, and I think that's something that startups should solve for. We definitely need a lot of talent. I don't think we have the quality of talent that we need to pull off. We have unicorns in valuation, we need unicorn in substance, a lot of it to be built with good talent, and I think we need a lot of people to come and do stuff, and interesting times. The growth stories, like you said, the mobile thing is just starting right now. believe it or not, we have 150 million smartphones, and probably only 30, 40 million even use them to do any transaction, right? And we are still growing markets. We're going to be 300 million smartphones like in next year's time, right? So interesting time to do anything in India. Don't have the right talent. Fortunately, we have the capital coming already because the Western market and the Eastern market both are coming to win India, and global companies fighting and Indian companies fighting. So I think I see a lot of global talent coming through the American companies coming in, being in India, but not coming to the India companies. I think it's an interesting thing for. I think engineering. I think companies have done some effort. I don't think in other fields have done anything about it. So
Yeah, you can drop me an email. Sandeep at lightbox.vc. We'll find you a job.
Firstly, hats off to you, inspiring a lot of Indians. And I'm a student and also an entrepreneur. However, like I feel that there is a point where you have to suffer. Like what do you have to say? Like if you have
So you're saying to being a student and starting a company? Oh wow. I mean, if you're there's I guess the desired success story is that you were a dropout and a billionaire, right? So, I mean, assuming you're pursuing that, I guess there's only one choice: you have to drop out. So, but it's very hard to give a generic answer to that. I think it's dependent on way too many factors. So it's a much more involved conversation to understand your business, your opportunity, your passion, your desire, your personal situation, all of that. So I think it would be wrong to try to give you a short answer on such a short description of your situation.
And about the dropout billionaire thing, I keep giving this analogy is that it's observed that people who have very high IQ don't believe in God, but not believing in God will not make you high IQ.
Well done.
So just a quick answer to that is, I think one way to answer that is look at that chart. That if you drop out of school, there's a pretty good chance, 75 plus, that you will not succeed anyway. And so, you got to have your waitress or waiting skills ready for you, because the overwhelming likelihood is you're going to do something and you're not going to have any safety net to fall back on. So just a quick statistic, the number of people in the US who get first round Series A funding, there are fewer people who get Series A funding than people who win $1 million in the lottery each year.
Wow.
So if you think about that and say, how many people and would I bet on the lottery, it's pretty low odds as you're going through it. And so you need some safety nets. In fact, I think you become a better entrepreneur if you know that if it fails, I still have some place to go to.
And these are the exact charts you don't look at when you are starting up, because you'll never start up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were saying that earlier, that if you look at something like this, that's why I said at the start, you have to be crazy. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, and I think, look, in fairness, I think as investors, we have to be crazy, and because we take it a step further, give an entrepreneur money, and really have no control now. So I think the whole system is geared upon irrational thinking, which will create stuff that should ideally be truly impactful and ideally behavior changing in some way. I hesitate to use the word disruptive because I think there's a technical definition of that, but nonetheless, to do something that really can create value. So, your situation's a hard one.
Yeah, I think a slightly different perspective on that is anything that involves passion. If you think about music, think about great sports people, you think about great actors, all of them have odds that are worse than this. And so, but people do them not because they say I have an X% chance of making something great. People climb mountains not because it's easy. They climb mountains because they enjoy doing it and they enjoy the challenge of it. And a lot of the entrepreneurship is like that. So when people come into my office and they say I have a job at McKinsey and it's going to pay me this much and I have this entrepreneurial opportunity, should I take, I don't know what to do, I tell them take McKinsey. Because if you're struggling so much over this question, whatever it is that you have just doesn't have your heart in a way that it has a chance of succeeding. Wait till you find that thing. For all the people who want to be opera singers, they don't do it because they had a job at McKinsey. They do it because they have talent and they have to do it. And so it's a little bit of a mindset on it.
So I had a question for both of you. This is in relation to search and acquisition of businesses. In the US, it's now evolved as more of a scientific tool and a systematic way of starting off something or probably taking a business to another level. How well do you think is this developed in India in terms of doing it systematically?
They think
Not
about these.
necessarily might someone have a Facebook idea, might someone have a free touch in their head, but they are an entrepreneur anyway. So how well do you think research and acquisition of businesses developed in India? I don't know if easier is the right word, but developed in India.
Yeah, so answering the question, we've had very few exits in India. Right? Literally, I can count them on one finger the last 2 years from the consumer internet space. The maturity to understand what to do, I mean, there are a lot of acqui-hires, not real acquisitions, and kind of rolling them into company and doing something. There have been some strategic exits where common investors think there is commonality in the business and you want to reduce the burn in the business. Don't see one business going somewhere and just merge that. The maturity does not exist at this point of time to what probably exists over here. Also, India is still very uh, emotional about businesses, and I want to just talk about that. I think the most common question that I have got asked around family is like, "Why did you sell this company?" Like, and I'm like, "But isn't that a good thing? It's a logical conclusion. I can go IPO or an exit." But they're like, "It's all about having one thing and doing it for like rest of your life," is the mentality, and therefore acquisition is also something that is not natural. People believe in just, oh, I'll create that division, I'll let this guy do that. So the inorganic method of growing is not something that is kind of happening at the startup scale, but I am sure that's gonna really accelerate now because people are learning that they cannot build tech that quickly or get that kind of talent quickly. So I think the short answer is we are not there yet, but I think it'll probably get there very quickly.
So I know there's sometimes a craziness to this, but there's also a sense of purpose and passion. But you love what you're doing and you would want to succeed. So, but there's always this imminent failure that you're looking into. So how do you handle that? Well, what are you telling yourself? Okay, I'm going to fail. I'm going to do this. It's like 9 wickets down. We're going to lose. I'm going to 6 or go.
So, what I have observed in founders that I have been fortunate to meet, they almost have converted. They have a system in their mind which converts pain into fuel. Right? There is just a weird thing about them that actually starts enjoying pain and failure. They actually just get more charged. I think they have this natural draw, right? Or sometimes I believe that there is some kind of a wormhole at the bottom, and which kind of puts you back into success mode. I think they're just crazy is a word we use quite often, but I think they're just designed to convert pain and failure into fuel, and they use that for the next thing, and they always like back again. Like our company, any company that we've had like crazy stories. I was with Bhavesh from Ola, and we were discussing that there were times where we were not even sure how the next month is going to happen for payroll, and we would meet at a dhaba next to our office and discuss about some of these things. And I think when we go back to office, we were still this guys who are like super optimistic. Absolute paranoid when we meet in a founder-to-founder meeting. I've never seen a founder-to-founder meeting which is optimistic. It's always like shit, like everything is broken. We don't know what's gonna happen. But I think you become that over a period of time.
I watched The Martian on the flight over, and at the end of it, someone asked him, "So how did you handle all the days on Mars?" You get up every day and you deal with one thing at a time, and you hope that you get through the day. And I mean, it's, look, we all live on Mars now. You can look at it that way, and you can say, look, that is exactly it. Every day is a new set of problems, and every day you cannot get overwhelmed by it, and you cannot look at that chart ever, and you can't ever, have that view. You have to believe that the whole world is going to succeed, and everyone's success is going to be yours as well, and everything is going to be beautiful, and just keep going.
So there's an entrepreneur in Iceland who founded a company, did really well, had $200 million that he made, put it in an Icelandic bank. Icelandic banks collapsed. And he had literally $800,000 left of all his wealth and a mortgage on his house. And then he took the whole amount and he had to bet it on one bet for a drug that was going to be developed. And so talking to him, the question was, if you had a coin and you had to flip it, and if one end of it would be, you'd have to declare bankruptcy, and the other end would be you could make $3 or $4 million, would you do that? And his answer was very clear. He didn't think for a second, and he said, as long as I'm flipping the coin, I'll do it.
Yep.
And it's this belief that what they do, actually, they have some power over the outcome.
Yeah, just one point I would add, just completing that point over here. I was doing a job before I became an entrepreneur. I can tell you one thing, that addiction to stable income is very hard to get rid of. So I would say that before you get addicted is the best time to become an entrepreneur.
Our man there was not even going to finish school. Yeah.
So I want to ask, what is the biggest challenge in serving the base of pyramid, especially in a non-tech space?
Yeah, so we've looked at a couple of things around there. So first of all, our view on most things is that technology is going to permeate into most ways most businesses are run, no matter sort of what industry you're in. And in some sense, India has an even better opportunity because of a lack of incumbents in many places. So as a result, you're not fighting a legacy system to put a more efficient process in place. So that being said, I kind of start by saying, look, all that old stuff probably needs to be addressed with a new lens in some way, shape, or form. Now, once you do that, you still have the problem of how do you scale your reach there. It's a large market. It's a very fragmented market. It's a very low ARPU market. Salespeople are cheap, relatively speaking, yet still not, you won't get enough productivity out of it. So, and I think this is the question that everyone's trying to figure out. I think it's there will come tools and services that will be so compelling and increase productivity for that group in a way that's so useful that hopefully that will kind of start the process of being able to address it. I'm not necessarily convinced that going in and selling them, a cell phone or something online or services of that sort. Maybe it starts with healthcare, maybe it starts with education, maybe it starts with something else, but probably first starts with them, their economics going up a little bit more so that they can consume, and then we can unlock it.
So we have just a few minutes left for the panel, and we'll take one question, and then we'll ask for some closing comments. Go ahead.
I think that we need to have necessary skill sets in an industry that we want to start a company in.
Yeah, so look, I think the most necessary one to start with is passion. So let's go with that, okay? So assuming that you solve for that to begin with, it now is a big function of what are you getting into? I'll give you an example. We've invested in a jewelry business. We've invested behind an entrepreneur who really understands the jewelry business. Now, I don't know anything about jewelry, so therefore I'm very reliant on her. We understand technology. We've similarly gone into certain spaces where I don't think anybody knows anything about it. And so therefore, you can sit down and say, all right, you have as good a shot. We've got a used automobile marketplace. The guy was not a used automobile salesperson before he started it. It's absolutely fine. He's just a really smart guy who we know, and I think he's going to build an exciting business. I don't know how much talk time you sold before.
I actually believe that it does not work if you have past experience from that, because you just have mental pathways already created that this cannot be done this way and this is how it's done. means I did not have any e-commerce, talk time, marketing, advertising, or payments experience before doing free charge, and I was not an engineer as well. So I remember the presentation of Jack Dorsey on Square. He said that in our company, 0.01% people have past payments experience, and 3 acquisitions that they've done are of design companies. And it's one of the largest payments companies. So I believe it's almost that you're prisoner of the knowledge, or kind of stuck with the old concepts. The guys who come from the outside, they see it in a very different way.
So last question to you is, most of the audience here is rooted in some way in the US, and most of them have some Indian origin or some links back to India or to the subcontinent. What advice would you give them? And the question that I'm asked very often is, should I start here and learn from companies, then move there, or should I go back because the opportunity seems to be bigger there?
So I'll tell you, I graduated undergrad in '98, and I moved out to the Valley, and I felt like I got there 2 years too late. And I went out there. I did investment banking in Credit Suisse. Worked for a really smart guy, and had a chance to do some really cool IPOs and whatnot. But I felt like I was there too late, and I squarely blame my parents. I was just born too late, and so if I'd gotten out earlier, I would have been there. So I think in relation to India, I moved in 2005 with the idea of not being late, and I think I was a little early. And in fairness, I think the over anxiousness got me there, but the last 11 years have been phenomenal in terms of an experience. I don't think that you can ever short circuit the time it takes to learn certain things and understand certain things. You may not always benefit from all those things, but it's fine. So my view on it is, if you believe that it's a market that you're excited and interested in, and you believe that it's a place you can handle being in, because nothing is going to go per plan ever. And then I think that it's useful to consider coming back sooner rather than later. If you're doing it because you can turn a quick buck and get out, it's not going to happen. And you'll be gravely disappointed.
Yeah, just the thing is, it's probably interesting. A couple of past HBS guys had worked for free charge pro bono and helped us on a few projects. I think that was a great way for them to learn how the India ecosystem works. We could take advantage of some of the talent that is there. I would urge a lot of you guys to kind of do something of that nature, or I'm more than happy, Sandeep and I both can help you connect with any company you want in India. If you want to do any project with them, that's the best way to know and test how things are before you kind of make a firm decision. And you'll be surprised that there is so much learning. I think one guy I know who worked on our on our fundraise, helped us put together a presentation, landed up a good job at a VC, and that VC actually called us as the only reference to the thing. And it's quite interesting how that actually worked from India as a market they want to invest in, and they kind of picked that guy who worked with an early stage company in the space. So I think it's quite interesting on how much exposure you could get from that. So
you're suggesting they come work for free? And then
you'll be surprised that people will be willing to pay as well. But I think you could kind of have you could have enough flexibility of how much time you want to spend on something. If you say I'm not going to charge you any money, because if you can go a 2-day project or a week project, or just work from here, do an email coordination, work with their teams, and so on and so forth.
So thank you very much. I'd ask our